Just to kind of introduce everyone, a little more formal welcome. Sir, go ahead, George.
We have all our guests that would join me at the podium. Thanks everyone for coming today and being here and supporting this event. So as has already been stated, today we mark the anniversary of the Great Easter Flood of 1979. I'm joined today by my partners from the National Weather Service, Marty Pope, Felicia Bowser, and Anna Wolverton, and also joined by Hinds County Emergency Management Agency, Rankin Moore, and Rankin County Emergency Management. Can I start all that over again? We're going to start all that over.
Whatever you say, Director, just go ahead. We're going to pretend like it didn't happen.
Just jack that up all together.
Never mind that whole live stream thing. Don't pay attention to that.
Those of you viewing at home, I apologize about that. Again, thanks everyone for being here today as we celebrate or remember the 40th anniversary of the Great Easter Flood of 1979. I'm joined today by my partners from the National Weather Service here, Marty Pope, Felicia Bowser, and Anna Wolverton. Also am joined at the podium the Hinds County Emergency Management Agency Director, Ricky Moore, and the Rankin County Emergency Management Agency Director, Mike Word. Known as the Easter Flood of 79, 35 of the state's 82 counties were affected by the floodwaters, and an estimated 15,000 people were evacuated during this great flood. The events that have transpired over the last few months have been a stark reminder that these things certainly can happen again. So it's important that we plan, prepare, and mitigate these areas to ensure that we don't have the devastation that occurred in 1979. These circumstances that caused the rapid rise in the Pearl River, where the river reached the record crest of 43 feet. And Marty Pope is going to go through that here in just a second with the briefing that they have put together. And then for perspective, during that time, the Pearl River flood stage is 28 feet. So the Pearl River reached a record height during that period of time. The flooding resulted in one death and caused between $500 and $700 million in damage. Moreover, President Jimmy Carter declared 35 counties a major disaster area. At this time, I'd like to turn this over to the National Weather Service. They've got a briefing for us with some pictures for the events that occurred in 1979.
Thank you. My name is Marty Pope. I'm the hydrologist at National Weather Service in Jackson. We've been having a lot of rainfall recently, so this has become a very opportune time to bring out some flood safety. But we also want to just remember this particular event because so many people now are no longer living in the areas they were back in 1979. There's new people living there, so we need to go over this particular flood. Several records were set by this along the entire Mississippi area. It went from, say, over across from Louisville, across into, over to Knoxville County, well over into Alabama where they had it, as well as across the Jackson Metro in the Big Black River system area. Most impactful flooding occurred in the Jackson area because of just the urbanization that we have here. 15,000 people evacuated, and of course today's money would be actually $1.5 billion if we actually had that happen. The 79 flood started. We had a lot of the antecedent conditions were extremely wet during that time period. We've had 42 inches in 5 months in parts of the Pearl Basin, which was about 15 inches above normal going into that year. This year, luckily, we do not quite have it that bad, but we're running about 120% of normal right now. Here's how the flood event actually, timeline, we actually had a terrible Tuesday outbreak occurred on Tuesday, April the 10th over in Texas, in Oklahoma, and places like that, major tornado outbreak. The Weather Service at that time was actually expecting severe weather associated with this as the system moved across. Well, as the system moved across, we had a front that moved in and gave us 4 to 5 inches in just a few hours over the Jackson metro area on the night of Wednesday, April the 11th. That continued as the front stalled over northern parts of Mississippi and Alabama. We had about 8 to 10 inches of rainfall that was reported across the area. The rain kept moving and it went across the Upper Pearl, the Noxubee River, and also the Tombigbee River systems up around Columbus, Mississippi. Heavy rain continued through the evening, and the rain finally ended on early morning of the 13th, Friday the 13th. And they had cold front push through, and everything there started to clear out. A lot of people didn't realize what the magnitude of this flood was going to be. They thought it was over. Well, actually, on the Saturday the 10th, under fair skies, the river went up dramatically. It exceeded the crest of record at the time of 37.56 on that particular Saturday morning. On Easter Sunday morning, we actually had a peak into Ross Barnett Reservoir of 162,000 cubic feet per second. That was actually released from the Ross Barnett Reservoir. We only had released 125,000 cubic feet per second, which was were able to save a lot of the damage that could have been done, because they actually were able to mitigate a little bit by lowering the reservoir during that time period. By Tuesday, the Pearl River at Jackson crested at 43.28, well above any level it had been, at least I think 7 feet above of course, the original crest there. And one of the instances about that too is we were actually stacking levees. The levees were actually stacked at least 3 feet high on both sides of it. The only area that actually the main area that took water was the Fortification Street levee was too low, and the water went around it and actually flooded in the city there, as well as some other issues that occurred. As you can see here, we had 10 to 20 inches over across the upper parts of the Pearl River Basin. This is actually a original map a rainfall map that they had posted, where you can see where they were analyzing, finding out that they had 15 to 20 inches of rainfall. They got a call at some of the weather offices stating that they had 20 inches, our weather office said they had 20 inches of rainfall. People began to freak because nobody knew there was that much rainfall at that particular time. So if you can see here, this is the river basin as it's set up in the Pearl River, and also the Lexapla Creek and Columbus and Noxubee. All that rainfall went across that northern area. If it had fallen over the reservoir, it would have even been a lot worse than what actually happened. Luckily here in the Jackson area, we only had about 4 to 6 inches of rainfall in places, and then maybe over the reservoir at 8 to 10 inches. But nothing like that. As you can see, all the different flood records that were occurred that time. If you see the little double stars there, that's the flood records that actually continue to this day. So we still have quite a few areas that are still the record flood of 1979. Here's some pictures that we had at Suckernucci Creek over in DeKalb, Mississippi. And they actually had flooding there. LaButcha Creek tore through Highway 14, just east of Louisville. And we were also, the city of Macon actually had massive flooding because of it over in that area. This is the headlines for Easter Sunday. What it looked like on Lakeland Drive near the quarter. You can see most of the area there was totally underwater at the time. And it was still, at that particular point, it was still rising. And this is what the crest was on the 17th. You can see everywhere that was flooded at the time. We had over at Lake Harbor Drive there, the trailer park was flooded. We actually had as much water on the other side of the lake and the river as we had on the lake side of it. Looking down Lakeland Drive, we actually had water on both sides of Lakeland Drive, and the backwater got into the back parts of the city. So there was massive flooding all over this particular location. Some of our issues that occurred that would happen at that time, it really made issues really a lot worse than what we would have today. Numerical forecast guidance from the weather models was very poor. We only had one weather model to look at the time. We had the radar at the office was a very lower radar that did not have the abilities to track. It did not have abilities to track your velocities as well. It would only tell you the intensity of the storm. That actually got struck by lightning. We relied on phone lines for all the river gauges. And also for people to read the river gauges. A lot of people couldn't get to them at the time. So, and also our network of river gauges wasn't as strong as it is today. We didn't have a service hydrologist at the time. He was away at the time. So there was also, the big issue there was also, there was a lack of coordination. And today, that has become a big issue with us, is making sure we have coordination, because back then, there was no talking between the Corps, no talking between the USGS and the Pearl River Valley Water Supply District and us very well. It was very limited. So here's our improvements that we actually have. Coordination calls that were implemented after the '79 flood, when the river exceeds 30,000 cubic feet per second, coming into the reservoir or going out of the reservoir. Today, we actually did one of those today just to do a test of it and make sure everything was working. So we had the Corps of Engineers and the U.S. Geological Survey involved in this, as well as the Corps of Engineers and also some other offices. The 88D radar has been huge improvement for us. We can actually estimate rainfall using the 88D radar. Now that helps us in these data void areas that we don't have gauges. Gauges are now operated by the United States Geological Survey, paid for generally by the reservoir. So that is a real big improvement. We get hourly readings out of there now, which is a big improvement. Improvements in communication, huge improvements. Cell phones are actually helping us out. Internet services are helping us out now. So, and we also have abilities to talk to people that we never would have had to before, especially emergency matters through chat. Improvements in forecast models at the river forecast centers. They've just upgraded all the river forecasting models they have. In fact, the river forecast center actually took over all operations of the forecast at Jackson after the '79 flood. Before that, it was just produced locally. Improvements in weather forecast models. We're able to produce better rainfall results from it, as well as also even to better protect our severe storms as well. Now also, as it was stated earlier, the MDOT actually raised the Fortification Street levee, which has actually helped to keep the water out of the city a little bit more, but we still have that issue in case we get a heavy rain event right across the reservoir. There's that issue about those the levees having to be sandbagged. So there could be some issues in that if we ever get a huge rainfall event like this that occurs very close to the reservoir of the city.
Hello, my name is Anna Wolverton. I'm a meteorologist at the National Weather Service. And I'm going to address some of the post-storm feedback and explain how we're trying to prepare for the next big flood. So when I was going through the official post-storm review put together by the National Weather Service after this event, I was reading about some of the interviews from people who were affected by the floods. And many people claim to either not be aware of the rising floodwaters, or if they heard of the rising floodwaters, then they just refused to believe the degree of danger. They weren't aware of how high the waters could actually get. And you know, this is a common issue that we hear of after every big flood event, and it's not just isolated to this big event. So to address this issue, a few of my colleagues and I put together these flood extent maps. And these are now public on our webpage for the Pearl River at Jackson. And we put these together with a combination of GIS and the ArcMap program and the flood extent simulation model. So these are modeled flood extents, and these flood extent maps give a visual image of the floodwaters at certain river stages. At the Pearl River at Jackson, we started at 28 feet, which is minor flood stage, and we go up 2 feet through 38 feet. So first, these flood extent maps, they're not perfect. They do not take into account the river flow or the friction, and they don't show depth. Now, these are just estimates of where the water will be at these certain river stages. And we do this to just bring awareness to where the waters can be. Now, these river flood extent maps are just available for the Pearl River at Jackson right now. We are working to create more of these for more river points throughout the area, and hopefully we will gain more flood extents throughout this summer. Now, with these flood extent maps, you can see where the vulnerable areas will be. And if you take a look at the Jackson area, you can see in northeast Jackson and on the Flowwood side and down in Byram and Florence, there's are areas that have greatly increased in population since 1979, and you can see where the waters will be at 43.28 feet here. So if we ever experience a flood of this extent again, you can see where exactly the waters will be. Now, I'm going to pass it to Felicia Bowser so she can talk a little bit about the flash flood safety.
Hello, I'm Felicia Bowser, Warning Coordination Meteorologist at the National Weather Service in Jackson. And I just very quickly want to talk about some flood safety that I think is very important. And when we're not in active flood, you know, a lot of people tend not to think about this. They think about other hazards such as tornadoes and whatnot, but it's very important to think about flood. Flash flooding is actually part of the top 3 weather-related killers in the United States. And exactly what is flash flooding? Definition: a rapid rise in water, usually near a stream or a ditch, or a low-lying area caused by heavy rain from slow-moving thunderstorms or by dam failure. It can happen with the dam failure as well. So when this occurs, people that are most at risk are usually those that are in motor vehicles. Some of them, they tend to drive around barricades and ignore the signage that's actually up to save their life, which they shouldn't. They need to look at those barricades. Or they can be short on time and thinking that if they go drive around that barricade, they can get to their destination a little bit quicker than they think, but just taking the long way around is just gonna help to save your life. It may be a little bit longer, but you need to do that. So it's the top 3 weather-related killer, and we just think it's very important to talk about the flash flooding. So some of the things, some of the tips, safety tips that people can do is to get high when they know flash flooding is occurring, and to know that if you are in a flash flood area, go ahead and get to a higher ground. Abandon stalled vehicles. It is not best to stay in that vehicle. If you find yourself going down some treacherous waters because you drove around a barricade, do not stay in that vehicle for sure, because 6 inches of flowing water can knock an adult off their feet, let alone a child. And it only takes 2 feet of flowing water to raise a standard SUV. So it doesn't take a whole lot of water to get a vehicle to go up, especially a large vehicle like an SUV. So you have to be very careful, especially at night when you can't see the road, because you have no idea what's beneath that road. You just see water covering the road, but it actually could be deteriorating underneath that road. And some of the other things that you can do to see if you're going to have any flash flooding, you go on over to your local National Weather Service website at weather.gov, and for Jackson it's /JAN. And on our website, you will see if we're having any flash flooding that's coming in the future. We'll actually have something called a graphic cast on our front page that will discuss exactly what's going to be happening. Along with severe weather, it will also discuss flash flooding if applicable. And lastly, we are on social media. We have Twitter and we are on Facebook. And as of April 1st, we are doing Facebook Live. So when we do that, you need to make sure that you get on social media if you have an account. And if there's something that's really happening, some extreme weather, we will get on Facebook Live and we will show you what's going on just to try to help save lives. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that presentation. At this time, I'd like to bring up our emergency managers from Hinds County and Rankin County. Ricky Moore, Mike Word, welcome y'all to the podium.
Good afternoon. I am Ricky Moore, Hinds County Emergency Management Director. It's very important to know that if you live in that flood-prone area, especially the area from 1979, during a flood event, don't disregard the news media, what the media is telling you. We've already touched on a lot of that. Register your cell phone. City of Jackson has code red. Hinds County has code red. Everybody has iPhones. Pay attention to social media, Facebook, Your weather radio. Be sure you have a weather radio in every home. Make sure you change your battery. Make sure you have homeowners insurance, flood insurance, renter's insurance. That was a biggie in '79. Now's the time to practice your family plan, your evacuation plan. Know where you're going, know where everyone is, know what to take with you when you leave. And make sure you take care of your pets. Most evacuation centers won't take pets, have arrangement for pets, so make sure you're taking care of your pet. Very important to pay attention to the information that's being provided to you through the different outlets. Just because it's sunny today doesn't mean there's not a flood tomorrow. Easter Sunday, 1979 was a very sunny day, and it fooled a lot of people. Lastly, I want to remind you that it's not if it happens again, but when it happens again. I think the '79 flood was a 500 to 1,000 year flood. 4 years later, we got an '83 flood. So remember, it's not if it happens again, but when it happens again. Thank you.
Thank you, Rick. I'm Mike Ward, Rankin County Emergency Management Director. And I just want to echo everything that's been said previous to me getting up here. And everybody's talked about, what can you do to help yourself? I just want to give you a really quick rundown of some of the things that we've been able to do. When we were able to get our hands on some of the data that you saw a few minutes ago of the 1979 inundation maps, we were able to get with our people in Rankin County and actually have that overlaid on our ArcGIS mapping, put in our address points. And let me just tell you, when you put the address points in on top of this map, on our proprietary data, it's very eye-opening. So obviously you need to absolutely heed the warnings, but I want to tell you this. Marty Pope alluded to just a few minutes ago that back in 1979, there was a big issue with communication between the National Weather Service and all of the players at the time. I can tell you now beyond a shadow of a doubt that we absolutely have a seat at the table with MEMA, with the National Weather Service, and all of our state and federal partners to help us be able to mitigate something like this should it happen again. And I'm sure that it will at some point in the future. I want you to know that steps are being made. We're able to kind of look in and see exactly where things happened in 1979 and kind of take into account some of the topographical changes that have happened over the last 40 years and get a really good indicator of what might happen should it come again tomorrow. So hats off to all these folks behind us, especially MEMA. These folks have bent over backwards to help us in any kind of disaster that ever comes across our way. The National Weather Service, let me just tell you, from an emergency manager standpoint, anytime I call and every single time I call, it's like I'm the only person in the state of Mississippi. I get all the information that I need and I get it every single time, and that's critical for us to be able to keep you safe.
The '79 flood is the raising of the embankment at Fortification Street. Now there's been other proposals made over the years. They had the Chaco Dam project up in the upper parts of above the lake back in I think probably back in the 90s or 80s, and that was not carried through. And of course we've had the 2 lakes plan. Now we're down to the 1 lakes plan. I'm not sure whether that would help that much, but I'm not the engineer there, so they could actually answer that a little bit better. But it's been very slow on moving to try to take care of an issue that we do have here in the city.
Anything else?
Any other questions?
No, I'm happy.
Not, thank you.
Thank you so much. You did a great job, brother.